from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to Space Station Live. You're joining us here inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room, located at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, looking down at the Orbit 2 team as they man the consoles throughout this control room, monitoring all the systems on board the orbiting laboratory. Today's team is being led today by Flight Director Richard Jones, and joining him there at the Capcom position, serving as a communication link between all of our teams down here on the ground and the astronauts up in space, is David St. Jacques. And those astronauts up in space right now, the international crew of 6 members from nations across the globe of Expedition 36. They're being led by Russian cosmonaut Pavel Vinogradov. Joining him, 2 fellow Russians, Alexander Mazurkin and Fyodor Yurchikhin. We also currently have 2 NASA astronauts on board, Chris Cassidy and Karen Nyberg, both on their second space flights. Rounding out the crew from the European Space Agency, Italian Luca Parmitano. The crew starting up their work week this week. We'll start off with Commander Pavel Vinogradov, who is moving throughout the Russian segment today, taking some photographs of the air duct work throughout the Russian ventilation system and downlinking those to the ground. He'll also be the first of the 3 Russian cosmonauts to do a physical fitness evaluation. All 3 will be doing that during their day today. Meanwhile, on board, Alexander Mazurkin is on the hook to take some photos for an ongoing Russian Earth observations experiment, using the station as a vantage point to photograph and document numerous climate change hotspots throughout the globe. He'll also be inside of the Progress 50P vehicle, transferring some of the cargo from that over into the station. You can see the current makeup of the International Space Station right now. 2 crewed craft, the Soyuz 34 and 35 is currently docked. Also 2 unmanned cargo crafts, the Progress 50, which Mazurkin will be inside of today, and also the European ATV-4 there docked all the way at the end of the aft section of the International Space Station. Moving on, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy is doing quite a bit of prep work for an upcoming spacewalk that he'll be taking part in. Cassidy, designated EV-1, and Luca Parmitano, designated EV-2, will be conducting 2 spacewalks over the next 2 weeks, the first of which on July 9th, noted EVA-22, and then on July 16th, just 1 week later, EVA-23, both of those scheduled to start at about 7:10 a.m. Central Time. The 2 astronauts will be heading outside, and again you can see those will begin at 7:10 a.m. Central Time, 8:10 Eastern Time, and we'll be bringing you live coverage here on NASA TV. The astronauts will be heading outside to replace a space-to-ground communications receiver and also some wireless video equipment, along with routing a few cables and power hooks for an upcoming Russian multipurpose laboratory module. So Cassidy today doing some onboard training for the SAFER, or the Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue, sort of the emergency jetpack that these astronauts have attached to their spacesuits during spacewalks, and also doing the enhanced caution and warning system onboard training. Aside from that, he'll be unstowing some hardware from that airlock that won't be needed for the upcoming spacewalk, and preparing the Quest airlock to support all of those EVA operations. Moving on, Fyodor Yurchikhin over in the Russian segment doing some maintenance on some storage batteries. He's also doing some post-spacewalk reconfigurations on the Zvezda module and also the docking compartment 1, known as Piers, where the Russian EVA-33 took place out of back on Monday, June 24th. That was a 6.5-hour spacewalk from Yurchikhin and Mazurkin, who were outside installing a number of cable clamps, handrails, and testing some rendezvous equipment, also for that upcoming Russian laboratory module scheduled to launch a little bit later this year. Meanwhile, Luca Parmitano changing out the recycle tank and the brine filter inside of the regenerative environmental control and life support system. He'll also be working on that onboard training, doing the SAFER and the EWCS, or the Enhanced Caution and Warning System training, as he continues to prepare for that spacewalk coming up next week. Aside from that, he was also working with the Melfi, or the minus 80-degree laboratory freezer, a little bit later today, inserting a few ice bricks. And then our final Expedition 36 crew member, NASA astronaut Karen Nyberg, is working to set up the nanoracks payloads She's doing a few hardware installation items and also activating a camera setup. Aside from that, she'll be cutting and replacing a few cables located inside of the small payload rack. So a little bit later in the hour at 10:15 a.m. Central Time, 11:15 a.m., we'll be cutting away to the Marshall Space Flight Center for an update from the Payload Operations Integration Center. Chris Cassidy's been working on a pretty interesting experiment over the last week or so. The Payload Center there responsible for coordinating all the payloads on board the International Space Station with the astronauts. So again, we'll be hearing from them just a little under 10 minutes from now. Meanwhile, on board, the crew moving into the latter part of their day. You can see Karen Nyberg there floating away from the Destiny laboratory. She's just wrapping up some. She just wrapped up a crew conference a little bit earlier that she partook in with Luca Parmitano, where they were going over a few upcoming activities that they'll be tackling next week. A little bit later this morning, she'll be doing that cable cutting work and replacement inside of the small payload rack. Meanwhile, right now, Luca Parmitano doing some of that onboard training for his upcoming spacewalk. Both him and Chris Cassidy right now doing the enhanced caution and warning system training. Just a bit of a refresher course that these astronauts do right before they prepare to step out of the station airlocks for these spacewalks. Cassidy, as mentioned, spending much of his day today inside of the Quest airlock. He'll be removing any unnecessary hardware out and moving it to the other sections of the U.S. segment on board the station as they continue to prep that airlock for their 2 spacewalks over the next 2 weeks. And that first one coming up on July 9th, the second one on July 16th. Meanwhile, the International Space Station right now currently at an altitude of about 257 statute miles, just passing over the southern part of Germany and out over the rest of Central and Southeastern Europe. We'll continue on this southeasterly track, passing right over the center of Saudi Arabia before moving out over the Arabian Sea and into an orbital nighttime. This again, the Marshall Space Flight Center, the Payloads Operations Integration Center. We'll be getting an update from them in under 5 minutes from now at 10:15 a.m. Central Time on one of the more unique experiments that's been taking place on board the International Space Station. Marshall POIC, as it's known, responsible for handling and directing the astronauts on all of the payloads found on board the International Space Station, taking a very important hand in coordinating all of the multitude of different science experiments taking place on board the orbiting laboratory. That Huntsville Control Center, one of many supporting International Space Station operations around the globe, of course with our main one being here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where you're now looking down on again at the Orbit 2 team, working in conjunction with, again, numerous control centers, many of the international partners, including the Russian Space Mission Control Center in Koryov just outside of Moscow, controlling many of the Russian segment operations, all working in tandem 24 hours a day. So Chris Cassidy and Luca Parmitano continuing to prepare themselves and the station itself for that upcoming spacewalk next week and then the following week, doing some of that on-orbit training right now. So the spacewalk is just one of many activities that these astronauts are responsible for during their expedition flights. The vast bulk of that being experimental research being conducted on board the International Space Station. And as you've seen a few times today so far, the Marshall Space Flight Center integral in that research. Why don't we go ahead now over to the Marshall Space Flight Center out in Huntsville, Alabama, where Lori Meggs is standing by live with an update on some of the activities. Good morning, Lori.
Good morning. Flight controllers here in the Payload Operations Integration Center are busy at work this morning. They've been working with Karen Nyberg from the Kibo module discussing Melfi operations. That's the station's minus 80-degree freezer that's used to store biological samples, among other things. In the meantime, Chris Cassidy has been having a little fun, all in the name of science. He's been working with a new investigation called surface telerobotics. That's where he actually gets to control a robot on the ground from the space station. I spoke with the payload developer about these operations.
What we're looking at is ways for humans to control robots in different situations, primarily to aid in exploration. So the other projects within human exploration telerobotics are Robonaut 2, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, and smartphone spheres, which is we've taken a smartphone and put it on the side of the spheres facility, which also very many people are familiar with, to basically make it a robot, a free-flying robot, and give it a little more computational power and some additional sensors that aren't already on board the spheres. Surface telerobotics is what we're trying to do is have crew on board space station control a robot on the surface of Earth. And this is a simulation of different types of missions that you could run, say in orbiting vehicle around Mars, controlling a robot on the surface of Mars, or a crew vehicle at the lunar Earth Lagrange point on the far side of the moon, controlling a robot on the far side of the moon, which we cannot communicate without orbital assets in place because we have no line of sight. So what we're testing is, what do we need technology-wise in order to do this sort of mission? Because we've never done anything like it before, and so we need to understand comm issues, usability issues, situational awareness. So we're looking at our user interfaces. Do they give the crew the information that they need in order to understand what the robot's doing, what's its status, and then can they control it?
So what kind of hardware are we talking about? Are we talking about a little robot down here on Earth?
Yes, we are. We're talking about a MER-sized robot. So those are the last two rovers that were on Mars. The newer robot, Curiosity, is quite a bit larger. So it's about a meter by a meter by a meter robot called K10 that we have at Ames Research Center. We've been using for about 5 or 6 years now. So we're very experienced using it. So we didn't want to have too many new variables in this experiment. We're running off of our experiences doing analog missions where we've gone out to the Arctic and California, deserts in California and Arizona, where we've tested the robot and done simulated science missions. So we want to keep the sort of the robotic side of this test as familiar as possible, and really look more at sort of the human factor side, look at the crew interaction with the robot. That's really where our science is in this case. Robots are fun, I mean, for everybody, and astronauts have as much fun with it as anybody else. So they're neat because you can they move around, they do things, and you can kind of relate to them for the project.
How exciting is it for you to see a project come to fruition like this?
It's great. I haven't had much experience on the human spaceflight side of NASA's house. We've mostly worked.
You play with robots.
I play with robots, exactly. So we've worked sort of with the Mars program in the past. We have looked at robots to aid human exploration, but we haven't actually flown anything with human spaceflight before. So even though our project's not flying any hardware, we're only flying software because we only need to send the GUI up to the station for the crew to control the hardware on the ground. There's still a lot of things you have to do to make sure that everything's safe, surprisingly, even with software. For me, it's a very new experience, and it's really exciting because, I can say I've flown something now, so I really like it. It's fun.
And for more information on surface telerobotics and other investigations, go to nasa.gov/station. And that will do it for us from the Payload Operations Integration Center here in Huntsville. Now back to you, Dan, at Mission Control in Houston.
And thank you, Lori. That again, the Payload Operations Integration Center out in Huntsville, responsible for managing all the payloads on board the International Space Station. Getting a look at some of the cool experiments taking place. Robotics being having a fairly large presence on board the International Space Station, not only with that remote surface telerobotics that has just been running recently, but also the station's unofficial 7th crew member on board, Robonaut. He was doing some operations last week, working with the task force and doing some airflow monitoring. That airflow monitoring, one of the more menial tasks on board the International Space Station that is necessary for these crews, but can get fairly monotonous. That's where Robonaut will eventually come in, being able to take over a lot of those lower skill requirement jobs from these astronauts, freeing up their time for more critical science and maintenance tasks. So he was getting a couple more run-throughs at the end of last week. So right now, the International Space Station currently handing over between satellites. So we're standing by until we resume audio and video communications with the Expedition 36 crew. Right now, the station currently out over the Arabian Sea. This right here is some video that was taken a little bit earlier this morning. You can see European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano there. He's donning this special device as part of his on-orbit training that he's doing today. Right now, Chris Cassidy and Luca are doing their emergency or enhanced caution warning system training, but a little bit earlier this morning they were doing some run-throughs on the SAFER device. SAFER, the simplified aid for EVA rescue, that specialized jetpack almost that these astronauts use as their kind of last safety line to the International Space Station, just in case they were to, for some reason, become detached from one of the numerous tethers that they use during spacewalks. Both Parmitano and Cassidy were donning this mask a little bit earlier this morning as they did this SAFER training. Basically just a refresher course for these astronauts as they've already trained very extensively for all of these spacewalking procedures while preparing for their expedition space flights.
Hey, Luca, we're on board with you. We think you tried our one suggestion was to make sure that the PCMCIA card was well seated. That was going to be our only suggestion.
Again, this is some video from earlier today as Luca Parmitano is doing some on-orbit training for that SAFER device, which is attached more or less like a backpack to these astronaut spacesuits during spacewalks. Kind of serves as the life jacket more or less for these astronauts.
SAFER OP. It's still not working. Do you have any other suggestions?
We do, Luca. Stand by, though.
Again, SAFER standing for the Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. A small backpack with very tiny nitrogen jet thrusters, allowing the astronauts some mobility in space.
Station Houston, Luca. Another troubleshooting question for you is when you move the HCM display switch up in the viewer, can you see a menu come up?
So right now on the screen I have a menu, the VRT menu, reset view, movie list, safer run, ruler mode, and settings. But nothing happens when I move around whatever I do with the HCM, nothing happens.
And just to make sure we're on the same page, and that includes moving the HCM display switch up, correct?
That is correct.
Copy, thanks.
That small white box you can see in Luca's right hand, an exact replica of the control box found on the Safer backpack. Safer device intended only for emergency rescue of the crew members, not an alternative to their various maneuvering tools. That's mainly due to its very lightweight and small capacity. It has a very limited amount of propellant.
Okay, copy.
These astronauts using a form of virtual reality to do this onboard training. Many of the astronaut spacewalk trainings also down here on the ground employ the use of virtual reality and computer simulations. That being done in tandem with their more physical simulations inside of the neutral buoyancy laboratory, the gigantic indoor pool that the astronauts use to simulate moving around in a weightless environment. Their suits weighted to be neutrally buoyant, so they neither sink nor float to the top while inside the pool. All of these astronauts, as part of their training prior to an expedition spaceflight, learning the ins and outs of numerous emergency repair spacewalks that they could be called up to do at any time. For example, the ammonia leak repair just a few months ago on board the station.
Station Houston on 2 for Luca. Okay, the next troubleshooting step that we would like for you to do is exit the VRT mode by hitting escape, and then you will want to re-enter into it using the menus, and you may need to remove the hood if you can't see that.
Okay, I pressed escape and the screen went blank and nothing else is happening.
Copy.
Okay, I'm removing the hood. Yeah, I exit the mode. I'm in dog with a blank screen, and what's the next step that you would like me to do?
Copy, standby. Okay, Luca, you will want to, on the display, enter VRT mode.
It looks to me like now dog is frozen. I don't even have a mouse. I don't have a cursor.
Okay, Luca, I understand that's unexpected. Give us a minute.
Okay, I found that dog was not responding, so I shut down dog and I'm going to start it again.
Sounds good. We'll stand by.
Again, this video from this morning as Luca Parmitano was doing some on-orbit training refresher work, more or less, on the Safer unit in preparation for his upcoming spacewalks on July 9th and July 16th. He'll be joined in those spacewalks by NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy, a veteran spacewalker himself. Among the astronauts' major tasks, they'll be looking to replace a space-to-ground communications receiver, and also some wireless video equipment, and all. They'll be on the hook to install a few power cables for the upcoming Russian multi-purpose laboratory module, scheduled to launch a little bit later this year. Once they're conducted, these two EVAs will be the 170th and 171st in support of ISS assembly and maintenance. As mentioned, Cassidy, a fairly veteran spacewalker. This will be his 5th and 6th EVAs of his career, having done 4 previously for a total of a little over 23.5 hours. Among those, that unplanned ammonia leak that happened back on May 11th. Luca, though, this will be his 1st and 2nd.
I'm in dog mode, and right now the HCM seems to be working, but the hood is not installed. When is the first time that I can unplug the cable?
So you had asked, when is the first time you can unplug the HCM cable? Was that your question?
I'm talking about the network cable. Do I have to connect the network through the whole time?
Checking. And Luca, as long as Doug is loaded, and sounds like it has, you can disconnect that network cable.
Okay, I believe that that's what happened last time, and that's when Doug stopped working.
Okay, we copy, Luca. If you think it'll work connected, you're going to give it a try. But if not, you can disconnect it.
Okay, how about this? Right now it's working, and I'm going to try and disconnect and see what happens.
All right.
Okay, right now it seems to be working.
Great news.
Stations ground space ground 2 for Chris for Jim RMS.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi Chris, sorry for interrupting your activity. We finished ground activity for GMRMS BDS checkout. Now it's your turn. We are ready for your task, GMRMS BDS checkout part 2. Okay, Chris, now we see through JPM starboard cameras, and just to let you know, we require the S-band for this task, and I don't think we will take a longer time for this task, but please perform it during the S-band AOS.
Okay, there's a lot of feedback. I think I should perform it right now during this little green part, or wait till the next S-band.
Okay, Chris, we have still a 7-minute S-band AOS, so you can go ahead to perform BDS checkout part 2 right now. That would be great.
Again, we're taking a look at Luca Parmitano doing some on-orbit training, some VR run-throughs to familiarize himself one more time with the SAFER device. All this in preparation for his upcoming spacewalks. This is just one of the tasks taking place on board the station today for this upcoming spacewalk. Both Parmitano and Cassidy doing the SAFER training, and also some on-orbit training with their enhanced caution warning system for their spacewalk. Cassidy also inside of the Quest airlock, cleaning out any unnecessary items and prepping the section of the station for their upcoming egress outside into the vacuum of space. You can see Parmitano here working with that SAFER control box replica. That is the actual control box that they'll have on their devices when they go outside into that vacuum of space. That SAFER device serving as kind of their life jacket. Not the primary mode of transportation for these astronauts once they're outside, relying on tethers and handholds to get around the station, but SAFER serving as more or less the last line of defense for these astronauts should they become detached from the station. A small nitrogen jet thruster powered backpack attached to the backside of these astronauts' EMUs, their extravehicular mobility units. On-orbit training like this is customary for these astronauts in the week leading up to a spacewalk. Just a refresher course, as they've already been trained and well versed in pretty much every piece of hardware that they'll be using for these spacewalks. Employing virtual reality due to the somewhat lack of space on board the International Space Station gives the astronauts a fairly real look at what they'll be seeing once they step outside. Welcome back inside Mission Control Houston Net again. Some of the on-orbit training Luca Parmitano is doing today. You can look back inside through the Destiny Laboratory. You can see NASA astronaut Karen Nyberg there. She'll be supporting the spacewalks over the next 2 weeks from inside the station, feeding the astronauts their various procedures and assisting wherever possible with views from inside of the station for their upcoming tasks. Right now she's getting ready to do some cable cutting and replacement work inside of the multi-purpose small payload rack on board the station. Nyberg's been on board the International Space Station for a little over a month now, launching and docking back on May 28th alongside Luca Parmitano and Fyodor Yurchikhin.
Station Houston, space to ground 2 for Chris Cassidy.
Houston Station, Chris is down in ATV at the very moment.
I understand. Thanks for the heads up. Okay. Yeah, if you could ping him for us, we'll get a couple of words from him.
Again?
Yeah, we just want to let him know that his private family conference coming up, we're ready to support that any time if he wants to start it early.
Okay, if I don't see him in a couple minutes, I'll go and grab him.
And my bad, I meant a private psychological conference, BPC.
That was Capcom David St. Jacques calling up to the crew. The International Space Station fairly large these days. Karen mentioning she may not even see him for a few minutes. Having the interior volume of about a 3-bedroom house. Plenty of room for these astronauts on board during their expedition space flights. So we've been following along quite a bit with all of the preparations that these astronauts are doing for their upcoming spacewalks over the next 2 weeks. We were watching Luca doing that on-orbit training with the VR helmet, familiarizing himself one more time with the safer device. Aside from that, the astronaut's still undertaking a few maintenance tasks for the day. Among those, for Luca, he was inside of the Kibo module a little bit earlier this morning, discussing a few operations on the Melfi with the Payload Operations and Integration Center. Melfi being that minus 80-degree laboratory freezer. Luke was installing items which are known as cold bricks, or ice bricks inside of the Melfi.
Station Luke on 2 for Melfi storage.
Go ahead on 2 for Melfi.
Yeah, I'm currently working on Melfi 2 for storage of the ice bricks, and I found in Dure 1, section 1 and 2, I found a unit pack of the desiccare package and also a humidity indicator. Is that supposed to stay in there, or am I supposed to remove it? I have no indication about it.
And Luca, those are supposed to stay in there.
And session copies, thanks.
And you're welcome, Luca. Thanks for checking.
Again, Luca Parmitano storing a few items inside of the Melfi, or the minus 80-degree laboratory freezer, and working inside of the Cabot laboratory. The Melfi is a cold storage device that is used to maintain experiment samples at ultra-cold temperatures for storage throughout a mission. This important device greatly enhancing the research capabilities of the U.S. segment on board the International Space Station, as various biological life science samples, for example, blood and saliva drawn from the astronauts, or also microbial and plant samples from various experiments can be collected while on board the station and then stored at these ultra-cold temperatures in order to preserve them for eventual transport back down to the ground. You can see a quick shot of what that Melfi looks like being taken out by current Expedition 36 astronaut Chris Cassidy.
Houston Station on 2, SSC 15 for the conference, and I'm ready to go whenever the other party is.
Copy that, Chris. And actually, we think it would be more convenient if you use this SC7, just otherwise we're going to have to do some downlink reconfig if you use 15. 7 is in Columbus.
I'll take 11.
Okay, 11 is good for us. Okay, Chris, 11 is good for us. Thanks. And for station on 2, Chris, we don't see SSC 11 on the network. It might be needing a reboot.
Yeah, it's locked up. I'll take the airlock. I forget the number, but I'll be there in a second.
Okay, we think that's 10, 10.
And so right now the crew moving on to a lot of their afternoon tasks as they're already in the latter part of their day, having woken up at about 1 a.m. Central Time today. Chris Cassidy and Luca Parmitano have completed all of their on-orbit training for the day in preparation for their upcoming spacewalks. The two will be conducting 2 EVAs, one on July 9th and one a week later on July 16th. The two you can see here, Cassidy will be designated EV1, Luca EV2. We'll be heading outside to do a number of replacement tasks and get ahead work for a future Russian multi-purpose laboratory module expected to be launched a little bit later this year. Aside from their on-orbit training, Cassidy preparing the Quest airlock for the astronauts' use in these upcoming spacewalks. And so tomorrow here on NASA television, we'll be bringing you a spacewalk briefing for this Expedition 36 crew. You'll be able to hear from the flight director for both spacewalks, David Korth, as well as the lead EVA officers for each one, Ernie Bell for EVA 22 and Karina Eversley for 23, giving an overview of the tasks laid out for these astronauts, also what to expect and any get-ahead tasks that they may have. Again, that'll be taking place here at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on NASA television. So while the station orbits about 260 odd statute miles just to the southeast of New Zealand, heading out over the southern Pacific Ocean. The crew members on board, many of them moving into their scheduled exercise periods for the day. Each of these expedition crew members getting in about 2.5 hours of exercise, the various devices on board, in order to combat all the negative effects on weightlessness. The full Expedition 36 crew seen here, international crew from nations across the globe, 3 Russian cosmonauts, 2 NASA astronauts, and 1 Italian astronaut from the European Space Agency. 2 of those astronauts preparing for upcoming spacewalks over the next 2 weeks. 2 of the cosmonauts having just recently completed one as early as a week ago. While doing this, the astronauts will continue with all of their scheduled maintenance and science experiment tasks throughout the week. Here we can see one more time Karen Nyberg back inside of the Kibo module, moving on to some cable cutting and replacement work on a small payload rack.
station on space to ground 2.
Right on 2, Karen.
And Karen?
Here, I was just going to make sure that all the safing is in place for the cable replacement procedure.
And Karen, this is Tsukuba. You go for the task, and safing is in place. And just to let you know, for your awareness, we are still undecided which camera to use today from port or starboard, but tentatively, we're going to go from port camera in GEM.
Okay, copy that.
And that cable replacement will be Nyberg's last major task for the day. The astronauts will have their afternoon daily planning conference speaking with each of the control centers around the world about the day's activities and what they have to look forward to tomorrow and the rest of the week before moving into their scheduled sleep period at about 4:30 p.m. Central Time. We're also bringing an end to today's Space Station Live. Be sure to stay tuned immediately following our broadcast for the NASA video file, giving a look at all things NASA around the country and at the various centers. 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Eastern, coming up next on NASA TV. We'll be back tomorrow with more Space Station Live and life on board the ISS. For now, we'll go ahead and sign off. This is Mission Control Houston.